15 seconds, everybody.
Where you don't have to go.
Hey, I want to take consent item C.
All right. Good evening. Welcome to our September 1st
I want to talk about
Kaysville City Council meeting. Thanks for being here, everybody. We appreciate it. Our opening tonight will be provided by Councilmember Mike Blackham, and then he will then lead us at the Pledge of Allegiance. Sorry.
For the opening, the part that I wanted to talk about a little bit tonight was just the mutual agreements that we have with our neighboring cities as far as the firefighters. I want to talk about the fires a little bit and the police department. We've had some significant fires in Kaysville. We've had 3 or 4 of them in the last month or so. And without these other agencies out there automatically coming, we would be shorthanded and it would be much more dangerous. And the thing I like to report about that a lot of people don't know is we've had these major structure fires. They've had some significant damage and nobody's got hurt yet. And that's always my favorite thing, is to say, fire's out, nobody's hurt, everybody's going home. But I mean, the cooperation that we get both from our fire and our police, I mean, it was 1 o'clock in the morning this week when we had our last fire, and I saw one of the police officers out there helping jack in some hose. And that's the kind of cooperation that I don't think people see and know about, and I want people to know that's a great thing to see the two agencies work together like that. And not only that, we have Farmington and Layton coming to these fires, and they are so much help, and they're always out there jacking hose with our guys. And so without that interlocal agreement and that cooperation, that automatic aid that we get through dispatch, I don't think we could be as successful as we are. And because of that, it's a good team effort and it works out really well. And I can't thank these other agencies and our agencies enough for the cooperation that we get, and our police officers, and they'll get on the radio, they get there first, they'll let you know what's going on, the dispatch, and they can relay some of that, and that helps a lot. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about a little bit tonight, because these are things that maybe these other council members don't get a chance to see or hear. And when you hear that Farmington and Layton come, but you don't understand that this is 1 o'clock in the morning, they're all coming out of bed, they get the page, they get sent at about the same time. We have a great battalion chief usually over in Layton. They have 3, depending on the shift, they come over. They usually get here, take command on the fires, and they help out a lot. And I can't thank them enough, and I want to thank them publicly for what they do, our guys and the other agencies and our police officers.
Thank you.
And then I'll just open the prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're grateful that we can meet tonight as a government for the Kaysville City officials. And please help us to make decisions that will help our citizens, help our employees, and that we can do it with a respectful, reasonable manner. And we're so thankful that we live in Kaysville and we have all the things that we have and the blessings that we receive. And please bless that everybody will be safe, return home tonight. Bless our public safety and our firefighters and all our employees, that they can do their job safely, and we appreciate everything they do, and we say these things humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. If you'll all rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance with me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and thank you, Councilmember Blackham. That was great. Really appreciate you explaining that to everybody. We have a great community, and we're really lucky and fortunate to live here. Our presentation will be by Lincoln Hill. It'll be a legislative update. I know, Lincoln. Sure. Don't do that.
Sorry.
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
Is there any call to the public?
Oh, we don't have anyone. Yes, we don't have anyone signed up to speak to call to the public, so we will turn the time over to you. Lincoln Schurz, thank you. representing Lincoln Hill.
Representing Lincoln Hill. You both had it right. Thanks, Mayor, members of the council, for having us here today. I brought with me Carrie Gibson, who's with our firm, as well as Maisie Thompson, who's our office manager with the Lincoln Hill Partners as well. First, I just want to say thanks to you as the council and the mayor for supporting us in our most recent endeavor on behalf of Kaysville City in pursuing some of the ARPA grant opportunities that the state put forward. For those who aren't as familiar with that process, the legislature in the 2021 session appropriated $50 million that could be matching grants that cities could apply for. In that process, there were $1 billion worth of local government applications, and there was $50 million that was awarded to communities. We were successful in working on behalf of Kaysville City and getting $1 million for some fiber projects that we're working on here in the city. So first, congratulations to you guys on the successful award of that grant. And the good news is there's going to be more opportunity. So our firm, again, on behalf of Kaysville City, was successful in getting the legislature in the 2022 session to appropriate an additional $50 million towards matching grant opportunities. And that window opens up on September 20th of this year, where you can make application for those grants. So our firm's been working closely with Shane and his staff to identify projects in Kaysville City that we want to make application for. It sounds like there's a couple water projects that are of interest for the city that we're going to be working on behalf of the staff in the city to advance before the GOED board. So GOED is the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. They're the ones that administer this grant. A little nuance this year in the grant process is was $25 million in grants and $25 million in loans. Obviously, our first preference is going to be the grant opportunity and not the loan opportunity. So as we've already approached and started working with the governor's office, we're going to be pursuing the grant opportunity this year. We don't anticipate it will be as subscribed to as it was in the previous round. Certainly that's our hope. Obviously, more competition makes it that much more difficult to make sure that we get these projects identified and kind of raised to the top, if you will, for consideration. So as I mentioned, that opportunity opens up on the 20th of September. The window to apply for that grant is going to be open for 7 calendar days, so for a week. And then they will close that, review any applications that they received, and should be awarding sometime late in the fall, sometime in November, December timeframe. So we'll at least hopefully get something in before the end of the calendar year. So we'll continue to work on staff on that. Last piece I'll touch on as it relates to ARPA grants and ARPA opportunities. For those who may remember, going back to 2020, when the Congress passed the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA monies that were coming to the states and local governments came in 2 tranches. So the first tranche was released in 2020. The second tranche was released today. So the state received an additional about $800 million as of today that will be that kind of second half of the ARPA opportunities. We are also working with legislators at this time to make sure that they kind of continue this partnership between local government and the state to identify projects that are of significant importance within our communities, and then obviously give you additional opportunities to partner with the state. I must emphasize, these are matching grants, and the good thing is they have not specified in statute what the match needs to be. Traditional grant opportunities like this have always been dollar for dollar matches. These are not. What they want to show is that there is some committed effort from the city or applicant that's making application, but there is no requirement that you match those funds dollar for dollar. So I think in the first round, the investment that you had already made in developing kind of the fiber network here in Kaysville satisfied the match opportunity. The same hope is true when we're pursuing the water opportunity, is that your existing investment will be considered as a part of that match. So we've been carrying that message forward with the staff in the governor's office, and will continue to do so. I'm going to touch a little bit on the 2023 session. There's a couple of things that I thought may be of interest, and then I'll see if Kerry has anything that he would like to add, as well as we kind of continue to pursue activities on behalf of the city. 2023 session. Stuart Adams, President Adams, has been actively working with us and a group of stakeholders on some potential additional transportation funding that would be coming available. So one of the concepts that's being considered by a group that's called the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission, the UEOC, is actually a delivery fee that would be imposed on any at-home delivery. So think of the Amazon truck pulling up to your house, or the Uber Eats or the Grubhub, tacking on an additional fee that would then go to support local road infrastructure. And the idea behind that, the logic, if you will, is we used to all go to the shopping center. Now the shopping center comes to us. And most of that impact is being borne by local governments on your local streets. The delivery truck is driving down your local municipal road or your county road, and there really isn't a system in place to really underwrite the cost of that impact that we're starting to experience on what have traditionally been local roads. And so the idea is tack on an additional fee, and the idea, based on what happened in Colorado, they charged a 27-cent fee. What we've been talking about is an additional quarter, so 25 cents that would be added to any delivery that's an at-home-based delivery. The investment in that opportunity would then be distributed among counties and cities statewide. To give you some perspective, and we're still working on the numbers here for Utah, but Colorado, who passed this last year, is raising about $1 billion a year just off of this delivery fee. And so the idea and the hope with President Adams and others is that we can raise somewhere in the magnitude of $200 to $250 million that would then go back to municipalities and counties for investment in infrastructure. Part of the process that he's asked us to help him with is identifying regionally significant projects throughout the state on local road systems that could be supported by this effort. So we will be working through a process, working again with your staff, to identify if there are projects within the community that you would like us to advance as a part of this broader package that the legislature will be contemplating. It's August, September 1st, I guess. There's a lot of politics that have to take place between now and the end of March when the legislature adjourns. But at this point, there seems to be fairly broad political support from legislative leadership as well as the governor's office to figure out something to invest in transportation, in part because of the dynamic that I just described, where we're seeing kind of this shift in behavior and shopping patterns from our constituencies, but also recognizing kind of the changing landscape of financing local transportation infrastructure for the state. And when I say that, the biggest issue that we're dealing with right now is rising interest rates. So if you look at the way we've been funding transportation in the state over the last 5 to 6 years, it's all been based on restructuring of debt. So the Department of Transportation, UDOT, which is doing most of the transportation infrastructure work throughout the state, goes out for a series of bonds about every 5 years, and they're usually a 10-year bond window. With the dropping interest rates that we'd been experiencing in the past, they had been restructuring that debt, freeing up new capital that wasn't now going towards debt service and putting that into new project investment. As I'm sure you've all seen with the change in the interest rates that both governments as well as individuals are seeing, the opportunity for the state to go back and restructure debt at a competitive rate has kind of gone off the table as a financing mechanism that the state can use to continue to invest in these projects. So really the only opportunity we have is either slow down on projects that we had queued with the Department of Transportation through the STIP process that are not considered quote unquote funded yet, or come up with some new investment opportunities or financing opportunities that we can use to invest in additional infrastructure. On a using that kind of baseline that I discussed earlier of a $250 million a year funding package, what they would likely do is create another 10-year bond. So again, we'd be looking at a multi-billion-dollar bond that would then go by region and identify these projects that I was discussing earlier. So again, we'll be working with your staff to make sure that they have an understanding of kind of what the opportunities are, hopefully identify some projects that we can get embedded into the legislation as a part of this package as it moves forward. So that's kind of one big issue that we'll be working on this year as well. I'm sure many of you have been hearing about the issues with both homelessness and kind of dealing with that issue. That's going to be another very significant issue during the legislative process this year. I think for Kaysville, one of the things to understand, or if you will, Davis County generally, is figuring out how some of what they'll call the shoulder counties to Salt Lake County can participate in addressing the homelessness problem. So I guess what I'd say at this point is keep your eye out for what that means. I don't think you're necessarily going to be seeing homeless shelters in Kaysville or anywhere in kind of northern Davis County, but to a certain extent, I think they're looking for the region to have broader participation in what they're viewing as a statewide problem around homelessness. So that's going to be another topic that we'll be watching closely and something that you should certainly be tuned into as well. In addition to that, there's going to be some fairly significant shifts in economic development strategies throughout the state, where historically the state has invested in job creation. They have been a little blind as to kind of what types of jobs we're trying to create here in the state. I think with the Cox administration, they're certainly looking at ways in which they can focus on specific sectors in the economy, and then obviously focusing on the quality of those jobs, just not the number of jobs. And so I think there's going to be a fairly large shift, both strategically through the governor's office, but also statutorily, to look at ways in which they can kind of foster that new approach to economic development here in the state. Again, our firm's been working very closely with the governor's staff on that, as well as it will impact the ways in which both local governments and the state approach economic development. I'm not certain how much you guys are using TIF or tax increment financing or the RDA tool that's at your disposal, but the legislature is also kind of scrutinizing the way in which we promote economic development within our communities as well. And through that process, I think the collaboration with the legislature as well as the governor's office is going to be important to both understand the tool sets that we have today and the tool sets that you think you need to approach tomorrow's problems. And so if you do have ideas, concepts, I'm certainly happy to work with your staff and see if there are certain things where we're kind of missing the mark with the tool set that we have today and ways in which we can expand upon that tool set that you have locally to promote the economy within your own community. Mayor, with that, if you don't mind, maybe I'll turn a little time over to Kerry and he can kind of fill in some of the blanks, and then we're certainly happy to answer any questions you may have as mayor or council here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lincoln. Good to be with you all today. I'm Kerry Gibson, and I'm grateful to be here as part of the Lincoln Hill team. I've been in politics about 20 years. I was first elected to the legislature about 20 years ago, and I didn't think that there was a group of people that I would ever be afraid to address. But what I've decided is it's whatever group of people I'm in front of right after Lincoln Schertz, because you know, he's brilliant. He's really got nice hair, and
He has
It's a wig.
he has hair, exactly. He has hair. Anyway, Lincoln hit a lot of the things that I would touch on, but I will just say, I have been really impressed with your staff. I want to make that public to your council. They have kept our feet to the fire. They've kept us engaged. We meet with them frequently, and I think they help us to understand exactly where you're trying to go as a council. Our job then becomes, how do we match your desires with opportunities that may arise, you know, for both policy and funding opportunities. And sometimes they don't always come in the exact order that we hope for or that you plan for. But the fact of the matter is, I think we've been successful and look forward to that continued success in the future. I was in a meeting yesterday with President Adams, and his advice to me was keep your foot on the pedal with some of these projects. I think that we are in a wonderful time right now where, generally speaking, we have a leadership team in both the House and the Senate that want to see Northern Utah grow and succeed. Mm-hmm. And they're willing to do what they can. Of course, they have a lot of political issues to deal with, making sure that people south of here you know, don't think that they've got their hand on the scale. But the fact of the matter is, they care about the community. You care, as an elected official, you care about the community that you represent, right? And that's what you're trying to do. And in their hearts, they want to help us. And so we're blessed to have that unique opportunity. We're going to work as hard as we can when we have that. And then when that changes, we'll change strategy. But for right now, we're working hard at that. And I'm really excited and optimistic about the opportunities that are going to be ahead of us in the next few years. So we're grateful that you had faith in us, our willingness to be able to help you. Hope that we've been able to show some value there and continue and are confident that we'll be able to continue to do so. So again, thank you, Mayor. She's a sharp one. She keeps us in line every time, and obviously Shane as well. So any questions for us, we're happy to take them, but thank you. Yeah. Anything specific or? Well,
There isn't any.
if you haven't been paying attention, water's a big deal right now. Obviously, we're in the midst of the most prolonged drought in a century. Obviously, there's a lot of different ways to look at this, and we are kind of torn, I think, up there. I think the legislature is finally starting to understand that there's got to be development opportunities along with conservation. It's not one or the other, it's both. When our forefathers came into this valley years ago, the first thing they did was build water projects, and they may be overbuilt, looking for the future as they did. They always looked a generation or two down the road. We're at the point now where we haven't built a major water project here in the state of Utah for half a century, and we're going to have to change that. And I think, again, as you look at our Northern Utah leadership, they are aware of that and see that as important. In addition to that, there is no question that our state policy And good common sense would say, before we spend a lot of money on projects, we should do the best we can to conserve what we have. And I think that that's a wise move. The challenge is, however, that during the last tranche of major spending in water projects, that was, in the 50s and 60s, mostly headed up by the Bureau of Reclamation. These were federally funded projects. Of course, the local taxpayers got to pay back every penny. I think we're probably still in the Weaver Basin system here as we move south. The Weaver Basin project was just barely paid off, ahead of schedule, actually, ahead of many of the other projects. But through that property tax increment that comes through the Weaver Basin project, we as property owners have been paying back that project to the federal government every single year until it's paid off. The Weaver Basin project was just recently paid off, so it's a positive thing. The problem is the federal government has decided that they want to be out of the water business. I don't think you'll ever see the Bureau of Reclamation come in and spend a bunch of money on a major water project again. So to the extent that that's going to happen, whether it's the Bear River project, the Lake Powell pipeline, or any other combination of things that might come into play, it's going to be on a state, it's going to be the state responsibility to do so, because as you know, cities and municipalities, counties don't have the ability to do that. And so I think it becomes more important that we figure out how to leverage federal assistance through our federal offices, and that's one of the things that I'm really grateful and proud of, how we handle things within our firm. Is it's not always just a state issue. We work closely with the federal delegation as well as the agencies on the federal level, and try to bring a picture, put a puzzle together that's complete, rather than haphazard. And so, on the state level, I will say, with the thought of projects in the future, the focus over the last few years especially has been on conservation and opportunities to conserve. Right now, the biggest push towards that has been the retrofitting or the requirement to retrofit every secondary meter in the state by 2025, 2026, can't remember the exact date, to have a meter on those. And there's just so much science behind that. I spent years on Weaver Basin's board, and the reality is that even if you're not paying extra for that water, the fact that you're metered and compared to your peers changes our behavior when it comes to water use. And so we're having tremendous success in the money that was put into the state coffers for specifically targeted to this secondary metering project. What was the amount on that last time? $225 million, and it has already that was appropriated in the last session. It was only opened up a month and a half ago, and is now completely spent, or completely allocated, not spent, but allocated to the agencies that are now going to go forward and retrofit these meters. So it's a good thing. We're kind of unique in the first place in that we have secondary water as systems, and that's a good thing as well because it saves us so much in treatment costs. But it's a real opportunity for us to figure out how to conserve and do better. So there's a whole bunch of that going on. I served in the Department of Natural Resources as well, and so we work closely with the Division of Water Resources and Division of Water Rights to try and move that whole process closer together and try and figure out how to combine this whole idea of growth that we know that we're going to have, and conserve our way into that growth as well as develop our way into that growth. We kind of have to do both. I mean, we have to do better with what we have, just like with the resources that you have at your disposal in cities. You're going to have growth, and your streets are going to get more crowded, and your infrastructure is going to be more stressed. You got to figure out how to handle more with what you have and yet grow and be wise in the way you do so. So water is going to be something I think that we're going to be talking about for a long time. It's not going away. There's a lot of things on the table, including the idea of a straw from the ocean to the Great Salt Lake. So from desalination to conservation, we're going to be talking about water for a long time. It's wise if you're thinking about water as well, even from a city perspective, because it's not going to be one that goes away anytime soon.
If I can jump in there, Gary, really quickly. So I was with Joel Ferry yesterday, who's the new director of the Department of Natural Resources, and he gave me a pretty staggering figure and something that they're trying to work on as well. So in the current infrastructure, just the current infrastructure that we have in the ground, by 2060, we have a $36 billion unmet need just in maintenance and operations of that existing system. So that doesn't contemplate any additional growth. And so if you look at that, it's essentially $1 billion a year in infrastructure demands just to meet the demands of the existing system, let alone anticipate any future growth that we have in that system. They're trying to figure out funding tools to both maintain the existing system as well as accommodate the growth that we're all anticipating. I do think that's going to be a big conversation about, do we do that through the rate structure? Do we do that through some sort of kind of toilet tax, if you call it that? But just different ways that we can start kind of approaching this issue and recognizing that we have this very significant unfunded need that's out there in our future. The comparison he made, which I thought was great, was to transportation. He said the dilemma is all of our stuff's underground. No one sees it, so no one appreciates that need exists. UDOT has the value and the benefit of you hit a pothole, you know about it, people want to fix it. All the stuff we're talking about is all the underground infrastructure demands that no one really sees, just expects when you turn on the tap, the water's going to turn on. And he said, we're going to be in a pretty sad space if we don't kind of figure this out. The advice he was giving me on behalf of our municipal clients was, internally, cities should be doing an evaluation of your own kind of demand as well as need on your existing maintenance opportunities, because they're going to be asking for it. If it's not this year, it's going to be in the very near future, but they're going to want cities to kind of catalog what you have in your existing system and better understand what your plan is to maintain those systems going forward and what sort of resources you're going to need in order to meet those maintenance obligations. So to the extent you can kind of get in front of that train, I think there's some value in doing some of that analysis today and just kind of being a thought leader, if you will, in that space as well. So, sorry.
Well, I was just going to add to that. If you can imagine, the Weber Basin system was built, again, like I said, in the 50s and 60s. And so we're now 70 years. If you imagine that, a huge pipe that might run down a major thoroughfare like Highway 89 carrying water, it's 70 years old. And, you know, the technology is different today than it was. And I replaced a pipe at one of my properties a couple of days ago that was 50 years old, and it just crumbled. It just came apart. And that's the kind of backlog that we're talking about on maintenance and infrastructure. Luckily, with some of these systems, you know, in Weber Basin's case, the reality is that they're in a pretty good place because they've paid off the federal project, and so now they can put some of that money towards that. But the reality is, statewide, that is a huge liability. And I think Lincoln is wise to point out that you know, that applies to cities if they have water infrastructure, which most do in their system. So anyway, it's quite a puzzle. You know, as Lincoln said, we're in the habit of being able to turn on the faucet, flush the toilet, and everything kind of just goes. But these things are becoming more and more complicated and more challenging, and frankly, they're more expensive for a lot of reasons. I won't go too far, but to give you an example, that Weber Basin about 15 years ago really wanted to build a secondary Willard Bay, another kind of additional 10,000 acre reservoir out there on the flatlands that they could use for storage. After many years of permitting and everything else, it fell apart because of the additional and the kind of the crazy environmental restrictions that went along with doing that. They ended up raising Willard Bay by 2 feet, the dam. So they built the dam up by 2 feet, which doesn't seem like a lot, but the reality is on 10,000 acres, it's a lot of water, right? But 12 years of permitting to put 2 feet of dirt on top of the dirt that was already there. So that's the kind of stuff that we're dealing with when it comes to building new projects. So that's why it becomes more and more important to kind of figure out how to do as best we can with what we have already, because the expense is just astronomical. A little bit scary for a state government even to be thinking about when it comes to a total number. It's a little bit out of control. But anyway, there's a lot going on, and look forward to continuing in that discussion as we go forward.
Mayor, any questions?
Thank you. I do have one question. You mentioned the second round of ARPA funding for some water projects. So because we qualified for the first round, are we on the back burner, second in line for new funding?
So it is a completely different grant process.
Okay.
And strategically, we suggested that they move the review committee from the Governor's Office of Budget, Planning the Budget, to the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. So it's going to be a new committee that's evaluating projects. There is nothing that precludes you from both applying, and it doesn't affect your scoring if you received in previous rounds. So it shouldn't by any means disadvantage you. And to be a little smug, that's why you pay us the big bucks, is to make sure that this project gets highlighted by the Governor's Office and make sure that it gets the attention that we think it deserves. So
Good answer.
that onus is on us to make sure that we promote the project and get it in front of the right folks so that you can get fair consideration there.
Okay, good. And when will you start presenting that? I mean, you're probably having discussions now, but.
So Shane and your staff are working with us currently on scoping the project so that when the window opens on September 20th, as I mentioned, we can submit early in that process.
Okay.
As soon as they close, they will start going through the due diligence process. We've already been meeting with the review committee and the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity staff person, Dan Hemmert, who directs that office, actively to make sure that he understands which projects we want to see kind of advance in that process. So we've already met and deliberated with him and his staff on that
Okay,
project as well.
good. That's good to hear.
And I will just add by saying these opportunities will continue because as we look forward now, as Lincoln mentioned, the second half of the ARPA funding hit the state today. The reality is that we will be looking in the legislative session to appropriate, to try and appropriate money into a similar type of fund or similar opportunities that we can then go to in subsequent years to try and meet some of these needs. So our work really does go all year round. And we're always thinking 2 or 3 years down the road. You can't get an appropriation from a fund that's not there with money in it, right? So that's what we're hoping to do, is continue that process.
Good, thank you. Anyone, questions?
Whose
Council?
truck is taller? That's what I want to know.
There's no question, Councilman.
Can't believe you let him get a bigger truck than you. You're the rancher.
His is a Ford, mine's a Dodge.
Okay,
Does that say anything?
that does.
I'm cheap, but rugged, right?
And rugged. You're the real Cowie. Okay, anyone else? Yes,
I have a
Councilmember
question
Jackson.
just for clarification. Regarding the secondary metering, so the last legislative session, we were with the League of Cities and Towns, and they were talking about how cities are going to be, we have to pay for all this metering, and it's going to be so costly. And the numbers they were throwing out there, it was just kind of mind-boggling, really, just how much. I mean, we need to do it, but the time frame that the state was talking about, it just seemed very unrealistic. And you mentioned that the money is already gone. I'm curious, do we need to go through you to try to get some of that money, or what's the process of that? Because they basically said the cities that are ahead of the curve will get more money. The ones that are asleep at the wheel basically will.
Yeah, as Kerry mentioned, I mean, they had the window open for literally about a week and a half, and they'd already appropriated all of that $225 million. In speaking with Joel yesterday, his department, the Department of Natural Resources, is going back to the legislature for an additional round of funding to go back into that program for additional secondary metering. I think based on the state analysis through the Division of Water Quality and Water Resources has said there's currently 225,000 unmetered secondary systems that need to be metered. I believe the first round of funding got them to 147 of that 225. So a very similar effort will be taking place in the 23 session, kind of led by the Department of Natural Resources to put more money in that fund. That fund is a matching fund, and I believe it's a 50-50 matching fund, meaning that the water whoever owns the water system has to come up with 50% of the resource. The other 50% of the meter would be covered by this grant process.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, the onus is on isn't the onus on the company that owns the water? It's not on the city.
And it just
The
depends.
city doesn't have to come up with the
The
money.
answer is it depends. So in some jurisdictions, it's actually going to be the special district who can apply on behalf of their entire system. In other jurisdictions, it will be the local government, the city or county that does that, and it really just depends, and Shane probably knows that answer as to who.
Because we've got Benchland, we've got,
Hayes Creek.
Hates
right.
Creek, like, aren't they having to apply for that stuff on their own?
They are, they all three were awarded some of this. It was 95 million that was appropriated the first time. That was what I understood in Weaver Basin and Benchland. And so here in the city, we don't service directly to secondary irrigation system.
Yeah.
But we are supportive of that effort. We've done a lot with the different companies, and also it's our residents that will be paying these exorbitant bills if they go up, if they're not able to fund these metering systems themselves. But
So yeah, more to come. I mean, I think the governor's in the process of putting his budget together right now. He should have that out probably late September, early October, at least for some consideration. He formally presents it in December to the legislature. But I think everyone's anticipating with this new round of ARPA coming in and just kind of the general tenor around what we need to be doing about water resources, there's going to be significant attention paid to this issue going forward in 2023.
Yeah, to your question, I think the reality, Nate, it was your question. The reality is that I feel like as long as these districts, cities that are eligible to apply, whoever owns the system, are showing that they are willing to make an effort, I think they'll continue to try and make that investment, at least to a certain extent, because I mean, when you think about it, here's something that may help you get your head around it. Just this secondary metering conversion will save us basically the amount of water that we can store at full capacity in East Canyon Reservoir. Not one of the bigger reservoirs, but it's still a lot of water, right? It's the lowest hanging fruit of anything that we can really do at this point. And so that's, I think it's widespread as this first started. The concept of mandating the secondary thing was a little bit tough, but I think it's deep, right, in the legislative process now. I don't think there's any turning from that. I think the goal is to convert the entire secondary system to where every connection has a meter.
Councilmember Oaks.
Okay, so you piqued my curiosity. I apologize, so how will it save the money? Is it by shaming? Or, I mean,
Information, right?
Peer pressure, knowledge,
cost.
yeah.
And at some point, they don't want to say this, the reality is at some point they'll charge for some secondary water, right?
Right.
Some secondary water has a zero charge, even just the meter with a zero charge makes a difference, right? But there will probably be some cost to it at some point. But yeah, basically it's by giving the homeowner the information that they need, comparing them to their neighbors and saying, here's what's actually going through your meter. And then at some point there will be some restrictions around that as well.
Okay.
Right now, it's just having the information at their disposal that's making a huge amount of difference.
does it give them the ability to turn off at each home?
Yeah,
Do you-
oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, with the meters, one of the nice things is, of course, they're able to communicate now with some of the technology, and there's a lot more opportunity with those types of things as well. So, and do you mean to have the water district turn off? Oh, absolutely. They can turn it off for sure. And they do, at least right now, the way that they're using that tool is once they can meter it, then they can single out the offenders, right? And help them to understand why they might be sinning, right? And help them. But eventually, I think there will be more restrictions.
Okay.
And as I mentioned at the outset, I think
More
there
and more
are
like
definitely looking
China.
for ways to pay for this infrastructure. That's going to come through some sort of rate structure at some point. I think we all have to be kind of eyes wide open.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you
The
so
more we
much.
use, the more we pay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate your presentation.
I'm happy to come talk about water.
Get us more money. Okay.
Mike, do we have secondary water east of 89?
No, we don't. Wish we
That's
did.
Okay.
We have
Okay.
distribution lines up there but we
Thank
don't
you,
have
John, for
any
that.
water going to our houses up there.
Thank you for that question, Councilmember Adams. Okay. Conflicts of interest. Does anyone have anything to declare?
No.
No. Okay, all right. All right, moving on to consent items. Councilmember Blackham?
I just request that we take item C off of there and discuss it.
Okay,
I'll second that.
Second.
okay.
I'm sorry, Mayor, just a point of
Yes.
clarification. It'd be best if you could move the consent A and B without C.
Without C.
Right.
If you could
Okay.
do it, then we'd
And
move
that's,
it.
yeah.
Would you make a
Otherwise,
motion
it'll
to
be
do
two.
that?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we accept consent items A and B.
Second.
Second, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussions? Okay, Councilmember Oaks.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. All right, Councilmember Blackham.
Yeah, just a discussion. I just want to have some questions answered by Shane possibly. I think this is isn't this your item, I think? I mean, it's probably Brian's item, but you're here, so.
Yes.
You get to answer the questions. Just to, and I'm glad
Actually,
you
it'd be
came in
Ryan.
because I was hoping that you would come also because I.
You were listening.
We're just-
Noticed that your name was up on the top of this. So there's just a couple of questions I have about the contract. It's not a matter of whether I think the power company has enough money to pay for it or not, because I think they do. It's a matter of how expensive this is, and I don't understand it. I want to know kind of what we're getting, and I just have some questions because we're going from $6,800 per year to $62,000 per year with an initial $145,000 to put it in. But when I go through the contract, I have some questions, and one of them is that it says that when you get down here to the things that are price exclusions, it says it doesn't include any hardware, it doesn't include Microsoft server, it doesn't call it any cost incurred as a result of a customer requesting a change, it doesn't include any customer reports, it doesn't include support program, initial training or configuration, it says it does, as a price exclusion. So and then any pre-installation site visit is not included. And then when you get down here further, it says price exclusions were gateway provider, sold separately. These are all things I don't really understand, but they've been excluded from the contract, and it goes down and talks about excluding training. If you want some additional training, it's going to cost you, it says price exclusion, $10,000 to audit and gain compliance for a non-approved payment gateway. But it also says in here that, and I don't know what this does. I'm assuming if you have a power outage, it must send you a text or a phone call or something, so I mean, you pretty much know your power's out because your power's out. And I don't know what a text, I mean, I want you to be able to explain all the things that this does because it's very expensive. But it also says in here that if they do call you and tell you about it, you have to pay 5 cents per minute for the phone call to call you in addition to the $65,000. So it just seems really expensive. And a big question I had for you was, we have this new customer portal we're working on with a certain company. Is there any chance that that company offers this type of a application at a much lower cost that would interface with our customer portal that we're getting now already?
Ryan, could I start, please?
Yeah, go ahead.
So just generally, what we feel like have received a directive from the council was to do a better job of communicating with our residents, specifically when it comes to outages. So what it will do is it will notify somebody that their power's out if we choose it to do so. But more than that, I think what it'll do is it'll give them an estimated repair time. That's what we're really trying to get, because I think people know their power's out, like you said, and their phone's on, but they want to know what's happening. So that's we want to communicate within 5 minutes of the outage. What's the next step? Is it going to be an hour? Are crews on their way? That kind of thing. And we've tried to do that via Facebook, and I think you'd all agree that has had its limitations. It's worked in some ways and not worked in others. So we can use this as a communication tool in all those ways. And of course, you just mentioned it doesn't do a lot of things. And I think they're trying to say this is something specific. It's not these other things. It's not all those other things. We don't care about those other things. We don't want this software to do any of those things. We want it to do what it's supposed to do, which is to communicate with us in outage management. In addition, this particular piece of software that we're looking at now, which we've been vetting out a bunch of different software, and we've kind of come to a conclusion where we think this is what it's going to cost. So that's what you're looking at tonight, and we're not in a hurry for you to adopt this if you want to vet it out more. But as Councilmember Blackham really illustrated very well, this gets very complicated, and I can answer some questions, and Brian can probably answer some questions, and Ryan can answer some questions. But I'm mostly leaving Ryan to those server details. I don't even know what those even mean.
I don't either.
You know?
It just, there's so many exclusions, it made me really nervous. And the fact that, usually you see something come up like this at the budget process.
Yes.
And was only 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we're getting this, and it's a pretty high cost.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to get more educated, learn more about it. I don't question the fact that power companies probably got the money to do this. And I always know, I know we are trying so hard to figure out where to get money to buy a shop, to build a shop and bond for that. And I look at the cost of this and I think there's a couple of bond payments right there,
And honestly, that's really what we want from you. If this kind of communication tool isn't important to the council, it's not really important to us either. Now, we think it's great. Brian's on board. They had a huge meeting on Tuesday with I don't know if every power department employee was there, but it was full. Dominoes, tons of, and they talked about what this software is going to do for us. And I think they left very, very excited about that and on board. So if communicating with our residents is important to you, that's really what we're looking at. And that doesn't mean there's a blank check or we want to spend all the money we have, but we, and Brian specifically, and he should be able to come later at a later date if you'd like to and talk about this, believes this is a good use of power funds, something that would be very important to him. So,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, maybe one last thing, and Ryan, if you have anything to add, please. But we've mentioned a particular software company in there we've been working with. We've worked with a few others. Ryan's working with a few more too. So we're looking to make sure that the direction is the same, to try and communicate with our residents in these modern technology ways with phone calls and text messages and emails. But we haven't really made a decision on what to purchase just yet. I think the dollars you see would be a not to exceed level. I think a lot of those will be less based on, we've gotten some preliminary numbers from them, but they don't really know exactly what we have and what we don't have. So we're capping that as a kind of a top level. But Ryan, is there anything else that you'd want to add from where you've been?
I was going to add one thing first, if that's okay. So the way this came about too was Shane and I and Brian and what's the name we were at the UAMPS meeting.
Oh yeah, yes.
And so they'd already been looking at some software, and then at the UAMPS meeting, another city was using this particular software, and it was outstanding in terms of what it can do, because we have talked so much about communicating, and that's why it was tabled. Well, it was removed last time as a consent item because they wanted more information, and I'll let Ryan explain the rest of it.
I'll just kind of explain what actually we're looking at. So, like the mayor said, we were looking at some piece that, like a piece of software that would communicate with residents. When the power goes out, we have a bunch of information from our AMI system. Our AMI system is basically, it's receiving messages from our power meters, and those messages are kind of a last gasp message that says, hey, I'm out, the meter's out, and it sends that message via radio to a collector. And so that message comes into our server, and so the server collects that information, and then it emails the power guys, the power crews. And so that's what we currently have is that system. The email is delayed by, I don't know, it depends, 5 to 20 minutes, depending on how many meters are out. But it's the system we currently have isn't meant to be like an outage management system. It's essentially just a system that manages the readings from the meters, and the incidental information is really super useful to the power crews. And so as a part of that, they see this information and they want to have, more valuable information. And so that's why we started looking at a communication system that would take the messages that come into the AMI system and send those out to the residents so that for example, you might know you're out, but your neighbor doesn't because they're at McDonald's, right? Or something like that. Well, we have the ability to match up those records of everybody who's out, and we can tie that to our billing system, pull the email addresses that we have on record and the phone numbers, and then send an email or text to those customers and tell them, hey, their power's out. Just the reverse, the same. So when their power comes back on, they get an email or text message that says your power's back on. And not only that, but hey, if your power isn't on, we think it is. If your power isn't on, you just call us and tell us. So that's essentially what we were trying to do, is get to that point where we could do that. And that's when we had kind of an idea of what we wanted to do. The mayor and Shane were at another meeting where we saw kind of more interactive content through the software. The MillSoft, that's what we were talking about before. But that software, essentially what it does is it does all the communication part, where it texts a customer and it when it's off and on, and a customer can interact by saying, I'm out. They can text in and say, I'm out. But what we've been looking at is a full outage management system. So an outage management system basically does kind of predictive analysis, where it looks at who's out, and then it determines where the problem potentially is. It identifies that potential problem, and then it texts immediately the on-call people, or calls, or whatever we decide to do. So when the first time that the on-call person gets the message, they actually have a place to go and look for the problem. So that could potentially be, a huge time savings in what they have as far as response times. And not only that, but it helps them identify the potential problem areas and where they can start looking first and that kind of thing. So the outage management portion of that is somewhat expensive in related to what we were talking about first with just the communications piece. But this is kind of like the whole thing. I don't know if I've gone.
Oh, okay. So, because I had many of the same questions that Councilmember Blackman had. I talked to the mayor about taking it off earlier as well, because just wanted some more information. So the actual notification, because you look at that and it's like, is there something out there that's 13 times better? Because that's sort of when I do my simple math.
Sure, yeah.
I hate to do math in public, but that was my simple math. Is it really 13 times better than what I'm spending now?
Yeah.
And then, like I said, on the budget process, we missed that for this year. And okay, so maybe we have the money, we can spend it, but should we spend it?
Yeah.
Some of the questions. And so what you're saying, and those are some of my questions, but so what you're saying is, it's not as much the notification that's where the cost is coming in. It ends up being like the power management, which gives the power company the information to be able to pinpoint where the problems are a little better. Is that, did I understand that correctly?
That's correct, yeah. Yeah, and the reason why, Mike asked some specific questions about the server and software and whatnot.
Yeah.
And the reason why those weren't included is because we already have a servers that can handle that infrastructure. So we're not worried about that as far as software goes. We already have that in place. So that infrastructure is in place. The same with the SQL server, that's already in place.
There's one other question that I had. That customer portal where we've already paid for the software and stuff, do they not have a link or anything that would work with that?
It's a different animal altogether. It's a different animal altogether because, it's the companies that do outage management and the companies that do data delivery essentially. They're just two different animals. So,
But it does sound like, even if they email the guys and say everything they do is going to be an additional 5 cents a minute. Sounds like based on what I'm seeing the exclusions are.
So that's if we do voice, and text is a lot less. So that 5 cents a minute is for telephone calls. And I'll give you an example of how this works. So we have, right now we're doing for our, sorry, what is it called? It's our billing, when we have delinquent payments, I forget what they call it. So when people don't pay their bill and we call them at the end of the month and say, right. So that's happening via a robocall right now. It's the same principle and it's the same cost. And we call about 200 people per month, essentially, for billing. And that cost is like $3 to $5. So it's very insignificant. And when we're talking about outages, unless we have like a huge outage, the costs are going to be very minimal. So based on the outages, that cost could be almost nothing or
right.
a lot.
And I base some of that question on the fact that when we got our annual report, we found out that 95% of the time, or more than 99% of the time, our power's on. We have very few outages, actually. And a lot of times our outages are Rocky Mountain. They're not us.
Yeah,
so if we do get a Rocky Mountain outage, does that immediately send out 9,000 phone calls?
No, because the way that the software would work is, we're really getting in the weeds here, but
it's a lot of money. I don't mind.
Okay. So the way that it works is like a power outage happens, right? And you and your neighbor, you call in, or maybe the AMI system's throwing out, hey, there's 40 meters out in this area. Well, the predictive analysis starts working. It identifies the common denominator between all of those meters. So maybe it's a transformer, maybe it's a switch gear, maybe it's something else, right? So it identifies that common denominator. And then the next thing it does is it sends a message to the on-call person. And that on-call person, the first thing they do is, okay, I've got an outage, and they look at their tablet or their iPhone or whatever it is they have, because it can be on anything, and they say, okay, I've got to go and look at this switch gear first. So they go look at the switch gear, and as soon as they identify, oh, yep, this is a real outage, and it's a real problem, they commit that outage. And that starts the timer for the records that they have to keep for the power, whatever. They have to submit some record. I wish
Those are
Brian
extra,
would
though.
have
If we ask for those records, that's an additional cost, right?
No, that's included.
That is included.
Yeah,
'cause
that's
it says if they have to do anything.
So it keeps the records, they have to do that anyway,
Okay.
and we already are doing that as a part of
'Cause
part of our
it just
process.
sounded
So
like
once that started, they commit it, then everybody gets a text message, and the crews they're put in like a time so when the text message goes out, it says, hey, we know your power out. The power crews are on site, and the time of restoration would be in 5 hours. And then everybody would get a text message that basically says that.
Thanks, Ryan. Councilmember Hunt, did you have some questions?
Yeah, I just had a couple questions.
Okay.
I guess my first question is, it sounds like maybe you've answered it, but is the addition of the outage management system that you've been talking about, is that why the price is so much different than maybe what I've seen?
Well, when you say different, what
before?
different from what?
Well, I have a meeting note from just something where a couple of us got together, and I think the figures I had, and maybe I typed them down incorrectly, but I had 45,000 for software.
So
and
we were looking at
5,000
a
per
communication piece only.
Okay.
That's what that was.
So the additional is this
Yes.
outage. So if that's the case, then I guess what you're talking about sounds really, really cool. What do we do now when there's a power outage? Like, how much time will it save us to have this computer analysis, I guess? Does that make sense?
Right now, we use the on-call phone number. So someone calls in and says, my power's out. to our night person that receives a phone call, a human being. That human being then relates it to the on-call person. So
Okay.
this such and such an address is out. That person then drives to this outage having zero idea if this is one person, 50 people, 10,000 people. They walk lines, they look for raccoons, they check the substation, but they're not able to communicate that there's nothing coming back to us from the meters that says, actually, you are out and 4 of your neighbors are out or 10 of your neighbors are out, because if that came back to us, then they could go, oh, okay, I know that these 10 people are on this transformer. So odds are good it's that transformer that's out. And so
Okay.
they can then even on their drive, kind of triage the situation with that information that's coming back into them.
Okay, so when I've been with like the power guys and they'll say, oh, I got a text, there's an outage in this area, it's this many houses. Is that just from what you're saying? Is that system is what's been?
Yeah, the AMI system, what it does is over the course of time, like an outage happens, everybody's lights might go out at the same time, but the AMI system's like collecting all this information, and what it does is it puts together the first email, and it says there's 87 units out. And then a minute later, it might say there's 57 units out. And so the crews, all they know is there's 87 and now 57, and they don't know where it's at, other than a basic address. It's like really super, super basic information.
It's kind of that geography piece.
yeah.
And
really
that's what we
setting
have
it
right
aside.
now is?
That's what we have right
okay.
now,
Because
right.
what you were describing, in my mind, is what I thought we already had.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay, that's good to know, thank you.
We know, in this case, we'd know which 87 were out.
Okay.
Specifically.
Whereas in the past, we didn't.
We did.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, Councilmember Adams.
So, maybe I'm just trying to tie this all together. My thought would be that we look at this from 2 spots. Like the city council side of things would be the communication, where we're trying to represent the citizens, where they're, like Shane mentioned, we do get a lot of complaints of people talking about outages and not knowing what's going on. And that's something that I think I feel comfortable making a decision on as a council. The other element, the part that has to do with the power department having this data information and specific, would be something that I would expect the power department to come and present to us if they want us to approve on that, and that it would be something that they would sell to us as to why they need it. Like, I almost don't think it's fair that our IT guys having to pitch this, I mean, in a sense that I would feel like I would feel comfortable saying, yeah, I like this idea of sending the texts out. I think that's fantastic, especially if we can draw it. Like, I know we had something on our website for a while where people could put their text or their cell phone in if they wanted to get information, and it was like a total failure. Nobody signed up for it, right? And so as long as we're using those utility bills and we can draw that information, I love that idea of notifying people, because like you said, people are going to be, there's people that are out of town, they may have like an elk in the freezer that they, want to make sure doesn't go bad or whatever. And so
Ice cream.
I really like the notification element, but it sounds like that the cost of that versus the addition of adding this part, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I just think that it would be nice if we had the power company come and tell us.
To be fair to the power company, I mean, I feel like I represent the power company pretty well, because everything that's ever been technology related has always come from me.
Come to you.
Has always come from me. So with the AMI system, I stood that up, and they install meters. So.
I guess what I'm saying is like from their standpoint, it'd be nice to know, because it's going to be coming out of their budget. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
It'd be nice to know, like, from them, if they said, yeah, we really need this, and maybe you can say they're saying that.
Well, I certainly can.
Do you know what I'm saying? That, like,
sure. I guess in defense of how this is being done tonight, we don't usually anticipate this level of detail of again, we hire Brian, we hire Ryan because they are professionals in their industry, and neither I nor probably any of you really get the nuances and details of this IT, and you don't need to. I think if you're uncomfortable with the amount, or if you want to scrutinize this more, that's great. We're very happy to do that. But the only thing that's making this different than anything else we do is that we're trying to buy something mid-budget year instead of presenting it in April when we had our budget retreat. That's the only thing different here. If Brian has on a list, buy outage management software in April, $150,000 or whatever it is, you could scrutinize it then. But we talk about we don't have time, and we don't have the ability to talk about. We buy millions of dollars worth of equipment that I don't understand and that you don't understand, that Josh buys. We just say, Josh, you're our public works director, go buy our snow plows and our water lines and our widgets and our gadgets. I don't know what he's buying. I mean, I do. We get POs and things like that, and you see them on the warrant register. But we just don't scrutinize it to this level. Now, if you want to do that, we are happy to do it. We'll invite Brian to come here and do it. But the only thing different in this case is that it's coming in the mid-year.
Councilmember, sorry, you guys, I just wanted to give everyone an opportunity to speak first. Jackson.
Oh, appreciate that. Thanks. Councilmember Adams, I agree with you. I initially, and with Councilmember Hunt, I was under the impression $45,000 and then $5,000 a year, and so the $62,000 a year potentially, and then the upfront cost of $145,000. I just want to take a little more time to know, like, specifically how much that will benefit the power department and the people and whatnot. So I wouldn't mind giving this a little more time to discuss this.
And I want to make one comment. This is not questioning whether staff. I mean, I am 100%. I like to try to agree with staff and what they need, because I don't understand what they do. The only thing I didn't understand was a lot of the costs that were involved here, and some of the, look to me, unknown costs that could be additionally added to it. But then I also wanted to make it clear that there's only certain tiers of wish lists or things you can buy. And something, I'm hoping that this is not going to put something that maybe in this budget year is more important that we won't be able to do because we bought this. Because I was kind of hoping we were saving money to get us a shop and, putting these bigger expenses into a capital improvement fund. But I go by what Brian, Ryan, as staff say, this is what we need. But I have to ask the questions and scrutinize it because it looked open-ended to me, and that's where I was a little concerned that even the 65 could turn into 100,000 a year or more. And that made me a little nervous, especially if it asked for additional training and those things. And that's the question I have. Is it that important that it's worth spending that kind of money? Is it that high on the tier of things that we have to have? Is it over a derrick truck or something like that?
When I was hired in 2002, I was tasked with building the power network GIS model, and we built it with the multi-speak platform. It was a multi-speak compliant, and so since that time we've been working towards this very moment right now, because that GIS model, the data that we currently use just to identify where things are, was built in a way to utilize an AMI software, but an outage management software. So this has been in the works for a very, very long time.
Mayor?
Yes.
I just wanted to make a suggestion because this isn't a timely issue. We're happy to scrutinize this, and if it's okay with you, maybe we could move this to an action item for next time and have Brian be there and just make sure that all the questions are answered. And he's very excited about it, but I certainly don't want to speak for him. And it'd be nice to have him. But I wanted to defend the process just because we don't normally have him come to consent, but we'd love to do it. We'd just like to talk about these things.
And the
too.
direction to him is, as far as what I'm hearing, is it would be really nice to know, okay, we are increasing efficiency. How are we saving money? How are we saving man hours? Because maybe the process won't require an extra person to do something. And that person could be doing something else. So we would love to be able to make a decision based upon increased efficiency and how does it truly benefit from the power department ability to do their jobs better, as well as increase communication, so.
We'll definitely do that. And also keep in mind that increased, better communication is going to cost us something. It doesn't necessarily mean we'll save money, but we do want to communicate the best way possible, and of course, there's a limit to that.
Well, but if the system's more automated,
Yeah.
and it might save some steps in the process,
Sure.
I think it could increase
And
efficiency.
like
so that
we
would be
said,
good.
when they're driving out there, they are going to work less because they're going to have a better idea of what that is, and he can explain that better. So.
Right, that would be good. How does everyone feel about that?
I like it. It'd be crazy not to use the technology like this.
Okay, so do we need a motion to move this to it? Okay, will someone make a
That'd be
motion then?
helpful.
I'll make a motion to move consent item C to an action item. Do I need to specify that
I'll
it's next meeting?
Second it.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Comments, questions? Nope, okay. Councilmember Blackham.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Thank you. All right, we are now at the work item A, Kaysville and Farmington Connector Road Interlocal Agreement. I'll turn the time over to Josh.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As was stated in the staff report, in 2017, we started discussing with Farmington City a project to help connect the two cities with the future West Davis corridor that was at that point in the planning stages. The draft that was included in the agenda is a rework draft that we had previously looked at with Farmington and with the council in 2020. There's some significant changes that we made to that, and I think most notably, as we've continued to work with Farmington, specifically their assistant city manager and engineer, there's kind of been a shift, I think, in their focus, their business park, but a shift in the agreement. Originally, it had been intended, one city of the two cities has to be the technical owner on paper. The discussions that we've had with them as they have their hands full with their business park and other things going on, and where over 3/4 of this project is in Kaysville, it makes sense for Kaysville to kind of be the on-paper administrator of that project. Made some other changes to that, and those changes are incorporated in what you see in that draft. What we're here for is to see what input or feedback council has that we might incorporate into that draft as we continue to work with Farmington, make final changes, and find ourselves finally adopting an interlocal with Farmington for this project.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions, Councilmember Oaks?
Well, I think you picked a good time to bring it because you put it on the same agenda as the water item, because yours is much easier to understand in my mind and much shorter. So, I mean, I read through it a couple times. It sounds fine, it reads well, but what's the actual project? That's what doesn't come across in the document.
So what we're going to be building with Farmington City, what's currently out to bid right now, West Davis Corridor is installing an interchange near the sewer district. We call it the Mink Farm Interchange or 950 North Interchange. And that will provide the ability for Farmington and Kaysville residents and regional
Anybody,
residents
yeah.
to come to Farmington and Kaysville to get on and off the West Davis Corridor as UDOT in the future. Sorry.
Are you funding this?
Yeah.
I think somebody is, but not me.
Oh, okay, so
The
it just
UDOT
has an
will be
interchange, okay.
redoing the Shepherd Lane interchange, so this will connect with that. The main focus of this project is we don't want to overburden the existing city streets with traffic, people wanting to get onto and off of West Davis Corridor, onto and off of I-15 at Shepherd Lane. They're going to install on and off ramps there. So that is the major focus of this in the early 2000s, and really even before that in the 90s. The city started looking at a project that was called Shorelines Drive, and that was essentially an extension of Angel Street, that would kind of act as like a frontage road system for the future West Davis corridor. That's what this is. It's a pseudo frontage road system. Let's, rather than local residential streets bearing that traffic, let's put it onto these major roads that we'll build and make it easier to get on and off of those systems, I-15 and West Davis.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense then. Thanks.
Question? Oh, Mike. has a
Oh, go ahead.
question. No, go ahead.
Councilmember Adams.
Well, thank you, Mayor Tran. Josh, always good to see you.
Thank you.
Monsieur Sondlaf. I remember the last time this came up, it was a little bit of a debacle, right? Because we were talking about monies and where they would be spent first and how much of that has changed? Because they wouldn't, Farmington didn't want to sign it, and it was like
Farmington was quite worried because at the time we had, I think, $4 million, well, $4.2 million, of an estimated anywhere from $10 to $13 million
project, yeah.
And so there were items in there that they were trying to push for to protect the interests of everything, things like phasing, and those were things that we weren't really comfortable with.
Right.
Like, well, if there is a problem, we don't want to be left out in the cold. And that, I don't think that was Farmington's intent there. But since that time, we've got an additional $6 million from the state legislature. We've got an additional $4.5 million from the county. And we've been able to secure additional funding to where, and in addition to the funding, our scope has kind of changed. The equestrian center there, we're stopping short of that. The project has shrunk a little bit for the time being. And so that kind of big question mark, the gray area, has kind of disappeared, and it's added some clarity to the relationship with Farmington and exactly what we're doing and what we're capable of doing.
So you feel like A, this is something they would probably sign, they're okay with us taking the lead on this, and B, the language of phasing has been removed from.
Yeah, we've removed the language of phasing. In my opinion, this very much meets the discussions that we've been having with Farmington. We've sent this to them. They're going through the review process right now as well. And so.
Okay, good.
Councilmember Blackham?
Oh, I don't know, John.
Oh.
That was my only thing. I just wanted
okay.
to make sure that phasing thing was gone.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
so
pulled that
glad
out.
I got to it before you.
Got it. It was exactly.
Councilmember Blackham's knuckles got really white when he saw you ask.
Councilmember Oaks, did you have any questions? No? Okay.
No, he answered my question.
Okay,
yeah.
anyone else? Questions? No? Okay. All right, thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion that we move this to an action item.
I'll second.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second from Councilmember Oaks. Councilmember Adams, any discussion? Okay, Councilmember Adams.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Letter B, an ordinance amending Kaysville City's code, flood damage prevention. I'll turn the time over to Dexter.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me here. So the purpose of why I'm here is to discuss updating our ordinance, of course. Why this has been spurred is because FEMA has updated their floodplain maps. So we need to update our ordinance to make sure we're compliant with all their regulations and requirements. And what the federal government has done is they have a national flood insurance program. So it's kind of twofold. It provides insurance to homeowners, to the citizens, in case they're in a floodplain. And then the second is it relies on state and local governments to oversee that these requirements are being put in place, such as base flood elevation. If a house is built in the floodplain, it needs to be a foot above that elevation, just to protect the home and minimize those insurance costs that may come from a flooding event. So that's kind of what I'm doing is I've been working with a FEMA agent they reviewed our ordinance and they identified certain items that were deficient and that we needed to add. So in that staff report, you saw highlighted which items we needed to change to make sure we were all right there. So would you like me to go over those items or do you just want to ask? Okay. I think another item I want to add.
Unless you want to.
Nope. It saves me time. And,
I mean, we
one
went
other
over
item I
everything
wanna
else. So
point out is the floodplain maps themselves. A lot of the old maps were kind of painted with a broad brush, and now they've gone and they've really done true and tried studies to see where these canals and channels will be affected. And I would say a lot of areas have been reduced. There are a couple areas that might have been increased, such as I just looked at the map, and the sewer district will actually now be in a floodplain. So, so yeah, that's kind of
The whole district?
what's happening.
Is it the whole district? I mean, all
Basically,
of their
whole
property?
Mhm.
Oh,
So,
interesting, okay.
It's an excuse to raise water rates, right?
Right, exactly. All right, well, thank you, Dexter. Appreciate your presentation.
Make a motion? Yeah, I motion that we move an ordinance amending Kaysville's City Code Section 8.5 flood damage prevention to an action item.
Thank you. We have a motion?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Thank you. Councilmember Hunt.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you. Motion carries. All right, councilmember reports. Does anyone have anything they'd like to report?
Yes.
Councilmember Adams.
The Youth City Council and our Grand Mayor went to the great effort of making 2 incredible scarecrows that are going to be displayed where?
At the Scarecrow Walk.
At the
At
Scarecrow
USU.
Walk at USU. And just a big shout out to Mayor. Well, partly because she does everything. She went and got all of the stuff, and you City Council. I showed up with a screwdriver though.
Well,
so.
okay, Councilmember Hunt also brought a lot of
Oh.
things. Yes.
Councilmember Hunt, I'm
and
so
she actually
sorry.
went
That's
and picked
true,
up,
you did.
She went and picked up the Scarecrow frames for us, so thank you.
I
for
brought
that.
a screwdriver though, so
It was
kind
an
of a big
effort.
deal.
It was a grand effort. But huge shout out to Youth City Council and their advisor, Linda.
Councilmember Hunt folds her bags, her grocery bags.
She's very
Yeah,
organized.
it's very
She is.
organized.
Yep. Thank you, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I just have, Davis remembers there is a VIP breakfast, and the council is invited, as well as your spouses or significant others. So if you guys have any ability to attend that, will you please RSVP?
Yeah,
They
Mayor,
would-
what date was that?
That is September 7th, and it's at 8 a.m. for the breakfast. And the event is free to anyone who's listening and wants to attend. It will be at the Legacy Event Center, and it's September 7th through September 10th. So, okay. And then the Scarecrow Walk is at the USU Botanical Gardens in Kaysville from September 8th to September 18th. And that is also free to the public. And Josh Belknap donated 2 shirts, so thank you for that. Our Scarecrow will be well-dressed. Our Scarecrow.
They were just your regular, they were your regular Saturday shirts, right?
They were extra medium.
Right. They were not yours? Okay. Shane, do you have anything?
Nothing tonight, Mayor, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, can we have a motion to adjourn? Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. We now have another meeting. Does anyone need a little break? No? Okay. I'd like to open our meeting for the Kaysville Business Park Architectural Review Committee. The opening will, well, Melinda, I will turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. As you know, the City Council also serves as the Architectural Review Board for the Kaysville Business Park. We received an application from Closet Butler, located at 1272 West Sportsplex Drive, to expand their building. And so we are here this evening to get approval from the board to allow them to proceed forward with their project. Here's just a aerial shot of the building as it currently exists, and that orange square up there on kind of the north end of their building is where they plan to expand. This is just a look at what they're planning to do. You can see it would be a storage area. There's no restrooms or break rooms or anything like that, just a pretty much a plain storage area. They plan to use the same materials on the building as they've used previously and or complementary materials. So here's just a look at what those exterior elevations look like, and here's more of a rendering. If there's any questions, we do have Kelly here representing the Closet Butler group this evening. He may be able to answer questions, but they're just looking for approval so they can proceed forward with the rest of their project.
All right, you're here. Would you like to come up and say hello? Thank you for attending.
Just with him.
Just with one.
Yeah.
My name's Kelly Nielsen. I'm the architect on the project. I've done a lot of work here in Kaysville and other parts. So do you need my home address for the
No.
records? Okay. So this is the owner. So I'll let him introduce himself and answer questions.
So I'm Brian Sadler. Me and my brother own Closet Butler. We've been doing business in Kaysville for about 15 years. We just bought this building and ran out of space faster than we thought we would.
That's great.
So this is really a glorified shed, just so we can store all of our materials. Most everything we do is a melamine product, and so it's really just to house that material to open up more space for storing jobs and production. So.
Thank you. And thanks for being here in Kaysville. We appreciate it.
Thanks. We like it.
Does anyone have any questions? A council member?
I have a
Jackson.
question. Can you explain what your company is? I'm so curious, and I'm not familiar with it.
So
Closet
we
Butler.
are a manufacturer of custom closets, garage cabinetry, home offices, any really storage needs on the inside of the home. We've been doing closets for about 30 years.
I'm so glad I asked because my wife is begging me for a new custom closet, so.
Well, we like doing it. So we employ about.
May not get his vote based on
That's good in African.
I'm just kidding.
John's so funny.
I'm so funny.
He just, yeah, right. Yes.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I do that all the time.
Well, thank you. Anyone else? Questions or comments?
No, this is easy.
Mayor?
Okay,
I'm just
yes,
glad to
yes,
see a
Councilmember
local business
Hunt.
growing.
Yes,
Do well.
it's great. We're so
I love
happy.
it.
I just have a question for
Sure.
Melinda.
Oh, okay, sure. Thank you so much. You can sit down.
Thank you. I guess my only question is, because it looks like it takes up some parking, are we still good parking-wise? It
Yeah.
still fits our requirements?
We did verify that, and there is adequate parking that remains after the addition.
Perfect, thank you.
Great question. Committee member, not council member, sorry. Okay. All right. I guess we need to make a motion, right? And have,
I'll make a motion that we approve the site plan as follows for the building review for an additional Closet Butler. Boy, that was horrible. Anyway, let's just approve it. Okay?
And I second that.
we have a motion and a second. All right. Committee member Jackson.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Thank you for being here as well. Good luck.
Motion to adjourn.
Sorry you had to sit for an hour
Motion to adjourn.
and a half.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Could have been a rezone and what?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
You're awesome.
Thanks, Mike. You had the same question.
Oh, no.
I'm looking at this whole,
I was thinking,
because I'm
wait, did I
thinking,
see it wrong?
this seems like we're being asked, when I talked to the mayor before the meeting, I said,
I've met him a couple times.
I want to know. And